This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Alright, let's get real for a second. Do you feel like every logo you're seeing out there right now is blending into one minimalist kind of abstract shape? Don't get me wrong, simple, clean designs are great, but I'm really missing the personality and the company values in logo design. Well, today we are shaking things up. We are taking on 3 different industries and designing logos that are not only unique and memorable, but also pack a ton of personality. To kick things off, we're gonna start quite corporate, and then as we go, things are gonna get a little bit more quirky, a little bit more memorable, and definitely unexpected. Because logos with personality aren't just for fun brands, they're for any industry. So sit back, have a nice drink, and let's have some fun creating logos together. The first company we're designing for today is called Brine, and they're an energy company that uses wave energy to generate electricity. When you hear energy company, you're probably thinking a little bit more impersonal, quite corporate. So how can we keep that professional side, but then inject lots of personality into it? Dynamic logos change to fit different situations, so we can get a lot of interest while we can keep the rest of the brand really minimal. Let me show you what I have in mind for this. So we know that Brine uses wave power, so I thought about the ocean overall, but I want to stay away from waves or water drops and try to think about more the power of the wave energy. If you ever went snorkeling or diving, you might have noticed how the power of the water movement breaks down the dead corals and creates this beautiful white sand. As a kid, I used to love walking in these tide pools, and you could always find these sea urchin exoskeletons that were left behind. They come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them even have kind of waves and really interesting shapes. I think a great way to get this balance between interesting and professional is to use this idea of the urchin as the base shape and then create lots of variations on it. This way we can get a dynamic icon that can transform to create patterns or for a promotional video or you name it. To get this look, I'm using the symmetry tool in Procreate so that when I draw, it's repeated on all sides. Since this will be used for a logo, we don't want to add too much detail that it becomes hard to see, especially in really small scales. But we still want to get that nice character in there. I tried quite a few different variations, and I think that these are my favorite. They're similar enough in shape that they will easily be seen as the same brand, but different enough to avoid any confusion. We can keep the word mark super simple with just a few customizations that tie into the style of the icon. And here we have our very first design. If you got a bit curious about using Procreate after seeing me do those sketches, I have the perfect class for you. It's called Kickstart Your Creativity with Procreate by Lisa Bardot, and you can find it on Skillshare, who have kindly sponsored this video. In the class, you will learn about the essential Procreate tools as you design quick little projects. I love classes like this where I can drop in and out when I have some more time so that I can develop those skills over time. I especially liked seeing another creative's process, and I really enjoyed trying some illustration styles that I've never tried before. Skillshare is the largest online learning platform, and I've also used it to learn about everything from Instagram marketing to product photography and productivity. I'm a self-taught designer, so I get a lot of questions about where I have learned the different skills to become a brand designer. YouTube is always a great option, but Skillshare really is where I have learned a lot more in-depth topics like logo design or how to run a creative business. If you also want to learn a new skill, or maybe just want to feel a little bit more creative between projects, Skillshare is offering a 30-day free trial to the first 500 people who sign up with our link. You can binge as many classes as you like, no limitations. I'll make sure to add that link down in the description. Next up, we are diving into logo design for a construction company. We want to show that this is a trustworthy company and also reflect a very long name, which is Solid Foundations Construction. Working with a long name like this can be a little bit tricky, so we really want to think about how we lay out the wordmark here. One way to make a logo and brand identity a little bit more interesting is to have a more minimalist core mark, but then create a responsive systems of different icons and illustrations that together form a much more complex system. Let's kick it off with a base word mark. I think stacking the words is going to be the best approach here because having it all on one row is going to be too long. When we have multiple words like this, we really want to have a think about hierarchy. Which of these 3 words do we want people to see first? I could see people start referring to this company as just solid construction, so I'm thinking that solid is probably a little bit more important than foundations. One of my very early projects was actually very similar to this, where the company was called William Ewell and Son, and we rebranded them as Ewells. Because it's a construction company, I want to find a font that feels almost handwritten, but is still very clean since the name is so long. It's kind of giving that trustworthy feeling, knowing you're going to get a great service. I really like this option called Nevada. It has that nice balance between retro, handwritten, and clean that I really like. In this case, we can't change the company name, so I think having something that highlights the word solid would make sense. I think an instinctual move for us as designers is to try to customize the text a lot for a mark, like using the bottom of the L to try to create a foundation for the I, for example. Although it's a great thing to try, with a word mark this long, you can run into a lot of legibility issues. Instead, let's have a look at lockup and see if we can find a nice visual balance where we really highlight that word solid. I think it will always feel more intentional if the middle word is the widest, so we need to find another way besides size to help solid stand out. To tie in with that retro look, I think adding a box behind it like this could be a good way to give it a little bit more weight. A super common question when you design logos is what proportion each element should have to each other in the lockup. And in my opinion, the only way to find out is to experiment. I like the way the box lines up with the edges of the N and the I, but maybe we can try to align the box to the edges of the next letters instead. Okay, take a step back and evaluate. I think it looks a lot more balanced, and for the word construction, I think having it line up perfectly with the O and the U might make it feel a bit too static. So let's have it halfway between the letters to fill up the gaps. To add even more character, we can emphasize that handwritten feeling by choosing Effects, Distort and Transform, and finally Roughen. Make sure to adjust the settings so you get a more subtle effect. So far, we have quite a simple, not super exciting, but a nice base. This is perfect for, let's say, their navigation on their website or maybe for an invoice. But for places where they want a little bit more personality, let's work on a monogram and some badges. Starting with a monogram, we always want to look for opportunities where the letters could interlock or where some of the shapes repeat. Although legibility is still super important, try to see the letters a little bit more as shapes at this stage. Maybe turn the page upside down and try to find those areas where it feels either too empty or too crowded and try to resolve them. Kind of like a puzzle. I like to randomly place the letters in different positions and see what inspires me. Once you have something you think could be a good idea, drop the opacity and sketch a new version on a new layer just above it. If you're not working digitally, you can use tracing paper to get the same result. Finally, I'm creating a set of illustrations that we can pair up with type so that we get those nice badges that we can sprinkle into the brand as an icon sometimes. For most brands, I keep the style super consistent, but in this case, I want that feeling that they almost collected these badges in different cities or from different projects, so we can have a lot more fun. The overall tone should still feel appropriate to their customers, but don't be afraid to have a little bit of a playful time. Finally, we wanted to work on a project with you where we didn't have to hold back at all on the quirky and playful. This third brand that we're working on today is called Parkbear, and it's a hotel and resort in the woods for families. Having full permission to just go wild and do what you want can be very liberating, but it can also be a little bit intimidating, because where do you start with that? We started by having a think about how the families that arrive here are going to feel, and we picked out 3 keywords: exploration, adventure, and time together. A lot of our inspiration came from looking at signage from national parks, looking at hiking brands and other outdoor brands. One thing that we took away from this research was the use of slab serifs. So if you're not familiar, slab serifs are kind of like a mix between serifs and sans serifs. They do have serifs, but they're a bit more square and they feel a lot more modern than a typical serif does. These more square serifs, they give us a lot of opportunities to interconnect the letters, and we were thinking that it's kind of like the paths in a forest. Jeremy started by playing around with the letters, so we got this nice, playful, jumbled look, which is actually a lot harder than you might think. The mark still needs to be easy to read, and we want to avoid the mark leaning one direction or the other. Once we had a lockup we liked, we tackled this empty area here. We tried so many different variations for connecting the letters in a way that felt like a natural and organic path without impacting the legibility. The key is to fill the empty space in a way that feels intentional and having a slight variation in the thickness of the line that matches the way that the letters are constructed. To add some directionality and a sense of adventure that we wanted to inject into the logo, we added this little flag at the top of the K. finally, we wanted to bring in this aspect of the bear and also create something that we could use as an icon for smaller formats. It felt really natural to use the first letter, which was a P, because it has this empty space in the belly. And even here, we had to try quite a lot of different lockups to make sure that it didn't feel too bubbly, but we're still getting that idea of the bear paw. It was so much fun to try to get that perfect mix between organic, playful, and still readable. So if you want to create more memorable, creative logos, keep these 3 things in mind. First, focus on the feelings and the values of the company that you want to communicate. 2, use different lockups and formats to expand the logo suite. And 3, create lots of versions and experiment. If you want to learn more about logo design and branding, don't forget to check out our guides and templates. And if you want to see another creative's process, maybe learn a new skill, then make sure to go to the description to get your 30-day free trial of Skillshare. Thank you so much for coming along and watching today. Good luck with your projects, and we'll see you next time.